What's up everyone, my name is Pablo and this is Indivisible Weekly. Believe it or not, we are more than halfway through the month of March. Now, time doesn't make a whole lot of sense these days, but what we do know is that there is a lot happening in the Indivisible movement as we get closer to the end of the month, April, and beyond. Now, we have a lot to talk about, so let's dive in. Thanks for joining us. Now, we have a big congressional recess on the horizon where you'll be able to use your constituent power to push your members of Congress to pass meaningful reforms. But before we get into that, let's talk about some of the ways progressives have already used their power in this Congress. As we talked about last week, Joe Biden signed the American Rescue Plan, a huge COVID relief package that is already bringing much needed aid to millions of Americans. But while we're still celebrating the American Rescue Plan, we need to keep in mind that the bill would not have been as strong and transformative as it is if it hadn't been for the incredible work of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Now, even though some provisions of the ARP were weakened in the Senate, progressives in the House wielded their collective power to secure the wins that truly made this the most consequential relief package in decades. Now, let's talk about a few examples of where pressure from progressives paid off. Thanks to the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Democrats in Congress were able to secure $1,400 direct checks for American families trying to make ends meet, including mixed-status families, $350 billion in state and local aid to pay for frontline healthcare workers like nurses, doctors, EMTs who are fighting COVID-19 on the front lines, expanded unemployment insurance despite Republican calls to limit benefits further than they already had, and a new and improved child tax credit, a push progressives have been making for years that will significantly reduce child poverty. These were incredible victories, not just for progressives in the House, but also for a country that is starting to finally see the light at the end of the tunnel after more than a year in this pandemic. To learn more about how the Congressional Progressive Caucus wielded their power during COVID relief negotiations, here's Indivisible's co-founder and co-executive director, Ezra Levin, who joined MSNBC's Rachel Maddow last week.
Well, Ezra, let me ask you about what you think people should understand about how the sausage is made. I feel like the Beltway press, much as I love them, really focused on what Republicans wanted and what conservative Democrats whinged about and all these things that didn't end up actually winning the day in terms of what was in the bill. If we put that stuff aside and look at what really did make a difference as to what was in the bill, what do we need to understand about how this process worked?
Look, top-level headline, you said in the opening, you got to give credit to President Biden, to Senate Democratic leadership, to House Democratic leadership. They put forward a really bold $1.9 trillion progressive proposal and ultimately signed a bold $1.9 trillion progressive proposal. But below the headline, there's this really exciting thing happening that we talked about before, which is Representative Pramila Jayapal, who is chair of the Progressive Caucus, started transforming that caucus, especially in the last several months. You'll remember that late last year, the caucus adopted a set of new rules that allowed it to start actually whipping votes and holding the line, saying, if you water this down too much, we will not accept it. So, yes, they pushed as hard as they could for a progressive bill going through the House of Representatives, and they got it passed, and that's great. But progressive bills pass the House of Representatives all the time just to either die or be watered down in the Senate. The key thing that happened behind the scenes, which is so exciting, is that as the more conservative Senate, including conservative Democrats, were considering this $1.9 trillion package, they were looking for ways that they could water it down. But there is good reporting out there now that says they wanted to take more chunks out of it. They wanted to water it down more, but they were afraid that the Progressive Caucus, led by Representative Pramila Jayapal, would refuse to accept those changes and would refuse to pass the bill. So as a result of that, you had a $1.9 trillion bill pass the House. It goes to the Senate. Yes, some changes around the edges are made, but ultimately they say, well, we've got to pass this $1.9 trillion version in order for it to become law. Darn those progressives in the House. I guess we'll do that. And ultimately, that's the bill that Joe Biden signs into law.
If you want to learn more from Ezra about how progressives wielded their power in the fight to pass the American Rescue Plan, you can check out the full MSNBC segment right up here. But here's the point. We have power. Progressives in Congress have power, and we have constituent power. And it's important to know that, because we still have a lot of work left to do. Now that the American Rescue Plan is officially law and has helped give so many people the immediate relief they need, we are moving on to recovery. and that's where democracy reform and the Thrive Agenda come into play. The Thrive Agenda imagines a COVID-19 recovery package that tackles the overlapping crises of mass unemployment, racial injustice, public health, and climate change to really transform our society. And with March recess right around the corner, we have an opportunity to make a bold statement about the need for a transformational recovery plan. But we need your help. We need you to start applying pressure on your members of Congress right now by calling your representative and asking them to support our March recess asks. And once you've done that, we need you to call your senators as well. And you'll find links to do all of that in the description below. Thanks for watching this week's episode of Indivisible Weekly. Be sure to like and subscribe, and check out the links below for more ways that you can get involved. Thanks everyone, take care, and I'll see you next week.